for the rest of the participants to come back into the meeting.
Okay. Everything's back up when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. For anyone that's on the Zoom meeting, we are out of executive session and we are waiting for the presentation of the budget. Okay, we're going to turn the meeting over to Superintendent Cost.
Okay, the next part. Oops, this microphone for you. The next section of the meeting is going to be going over the full operating budget followed by the capital budget. The way the presentation will go is first we're going to start with special education rates. Those rates are set each year so that students who have come into our district with the PATH program and KS tuition and need additional services like occupational therapy or physical therapy.
Beth, just to let you know, we can't hear anything.
To the sending towns. The first item.
Yep, I was on mute. I'm sorry, but someone else's speaker might be on. There's a lot of feedback. Stacy, you're getting feedback?
Yeah, I had a hard time hearing.
Okay.
Stacy, are you able to hear me now?
Much better.
Okay, I'll repeat what I said. The next section of the agenda is the approval of the recommended special education rates for next year. Special education rates are for students who attend our PATHS program from outside of this district. So if those students need a particular service, like occupational therapy or physical therapy, we set a rate per hour so that we can notify the sending district of that rate and incorporate it into the cost of their contract. We've started doing this each year at this meeting so that we would have the rates set for anticipation of what we might receive in revenue based on our current enrollment or enrollment going into next year. So the first item is possible action on the 2021-2022 special education related services and equipment rates. And that should be the first handout on the top of your paper document there. If there are any questions about these rates, I ask that you put a motion on the table first before the question is asked and have a proper discussion. And Todd and Andrea and I are here to answer questions for you.
This is Roxy Finer. I make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 special education related services and equipment rates as presented.
Matt Homer, second.
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Care to explain to us how we came up with these rates, please?
Todd, would you please explain the origin of these rates?
So these rates are from last year. That we did an analysis of rates, going rates, and so these are last year's rates plus 3%. Increase expected for either salary or what the going rate is.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries.
Thank you. The next portion of the meeting is the 2021-2022 operating budget, which will be followed by the capital budget, which is a 5-year plan. So we'll start with a presentation from Todd, and then we will follow through with pupil services, curriculum, high school, center school, and Black Rock. Central office is inclusive of technologies budget. Pupil services is inclusive of the medical services budget. The high school is inclusive of the athletics budget.
You want me to use that or the computer?
Whichever way you prefer. Stacy, can you hear?
Can you hear Todd if he talks into his computer?
Can you hear me,
I can-
Stacy?
I can hear you. There is a little bit of feedback still. I didn't know if you needed me to change to change the co-host so that he could share anything on the screen.
We're fine, Stacy. What we
Okay.
provided to you in the PowerPoint would be what he's sharing.
Sure, no
So
problem.
you can just go to the blue slides.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, Thomaston Public Schools education budget for fiscal year 21-22. Our mission statement in partnership with family, school, and community. Our mission is to educate, challenge, and inspire each individual to excel and become a contributing member of society. So right to the numbers, our operating budget request, and this includes the whole budget. It does not take into consideration the revenue that we also offset the budget, but our 2021 budget is $16,340,259. 21-22 budget, $16,865,352. For a 21-22 increase of $525,093 or 3.21%. So the superintendent mentioned that last year in the budget, we were able to prepay a few items due to COVID savings, and that reduced our 2021 budget to zero. So at the time, it was brought up that, well, you're gonna have to make that up the following year. So this is the effect of that in this slide. Our surplus that we used to prepay the pension and debt service was $265,978. That amount represents a 1.63 budget increase to the operating budget. So taking that out, the remaining increase to get to that 525,093 is $259,115 as new budget dollar increases, and that represents a 1.58 budget increase to the operating budget. So now with the town allocation budget, our 2021 budget was $15,257,126. 21-22 budget, $15,858,880, or an increase of $601,754, or an increase of 3.94%. Again, using that same logic for how that prepayment of those items affected the town allocation budget. Again, we used $265,978. That represents a 1.74 budget increase. So the new dollar increase is $335,776, where that represents a 2.2 budget increase to the town allocation budget. So again, we are at 3.94%, but really 2.2 represents new dollars in the budget. For a budget perspective, 2017-2018 budget increase was 0.287% or $42,573. The 2018-2019 budget increase is 1.2% or $198,843. The 19-20 budget increase was 1.24% or $187,592. And the current budget 2021 we had a 0% increase. So overall, the past 4 years, the increase has been very reasonable. Initially, when all the budget requests came in, we were at 7.45%. Regionalization efforts have helped reduce costs like bus transportation. We bid out with Thomaston, Woken and Plymouth, our oil bidding the same. Business manager and food service directors are shared with other districts. The administration worked diligently and collaboratively to reduce the budget with the least effect on student learning. Thomaston 2021 net current expenditures per pupil is $15,972, which ranks 137 of 166 towns, cities, and districts in Connecticut.
Can I take a moment to highlight that? Stacy, are you able to hear me without a microphone?
Yeah,
So that last bullet
perfect.
clearly states that there are 136 towns in the state of Connecticut that spend more per pupil than Thomaston. I want to explain what that rank means. So we are closer to frugal than other towns. We are one of the most frugal towns.
Okay, thank you. So just to go over the object codes, and again, I'm going to go over it briefly. The administrators are going to go into more depth. Our salary object line item has increased $286,217. The increase is due to the social worker needed at center school, a new kindergarten teacher, and a new preschool teacher. These increases are offset by the elimination of the math instructional coach position. The current coach will assume the position of center school math interventionist, vacated by recent retirement, and the current literacy coach will become instructional coach K-6. Our 112 account is increased by $44,656. That's primarily due to the additional custodian that was added to the budget. Our benefits account is increased.
One second, Todd. Again, I want to emphasize something. So in that first bullet point about salaries, last year our budget was cut down to 0, but we needed a social worker. We hired the social worker this year. We're officially putting their salary into the budget. So we have a social worker already employed in this position at center schools, actually the year before. Kindergarten, we were expecting a very large incoming kindergarten class last year for this fall. So we added a 4th kindergarten teacher. Because of COVID, that 4th kindergarten teacher was repurposed to be an in-person teacher in a classroom where a teacher could not work in person. But that person is most likely going to be needed next year because of the number of students who have either opted out of enrolling into kindergarten, increasing next year's group of students, or those parents who are requesting particular accommodations for next year with kindergarten, in other words, retention. Finally, the math instructional coach. We've gone to the Board of Finance several years ago, a good number of years ago, letting them know that we were looking for an instructional model change with staff where we were going to have a math instructional coach for our teachers and an English language arts instructional coach for our teachers. We have a retirement of one of those coaches, and we are choosing not to fill that position. We are choosing to utilize that position in a different way. So the funds for that position are still going into intervention, but they are not going to be for a particular position. So we have an interventionist now, an additional interventionist that we hired in last year's budget, so that person will just continue on in that role. We will not fill the math position. The English language arts coach position will be a dual role. One person, two jobs. So I just wanted to be clear about that because there were some very key points in there that the Board of Finance supported in years past. And I wanted the Board of Finance to understand that in this budget, to keep things as close to our students as possible, we're choosing to maintain an interventionist, which is closer to our children, and eliminate the position that's already been vacated, so no unemployment is necessary for a position that's closer to our teachers. John has a question in the back. Are you going to accept questions about that?
Sure. Yes.
I want to point out that part of the instructional code, not that we don't feel that we need instructional code, we feel that we would like both, but we know that that's not a reality. But it should be understood in any other way other than us having to choose the most for what we can get. And we brought an interventionist to serve our students better at this point. But ideally, we would have both.
Agreed. And the team, to Todd's point in the earlier slide, the administrative team got together, as we do every year, and we made a decision. What positions are we looking to keep? What positions can be trimmed? What resources can we purchase, equipment, all of that? And we prioritize across the district for what will give our students the best result with the best approach to spending. So John's point is well taken, and it is something that we get together and make a decision on. So even John speaking up about this position is important to highlight, because this position wasn't even in the high school to begin with. And John is in support of what we're doing in the same way that we would be in support of things that he would do that don't affect necessarily the grade level that one of the other administrators work in. So that's a key component of what makes our budget a successful one, because our planning is one that's harmonious.
Okay, benefits account object code 200 is increased 313,675. Part of that is our health benefit increase. We originally did get a 7% initial increase to the benefits from Anthem. We were able to reduce that a little bit because there is a surplus projection for this year. So we're able to reduce that to 3.48% in health benefits. Our severance increase, we had some additional retirements that have come across. Our pension increase, we've already talked about. We had a $0 amount in 1920, so the 200,000 this year is an increase from that. Our other professional tech services, we have an increase of 58,644, mainly due to our need of an HR person for 2 days a week. And also because of the decrease in tuition revenue from the PATH program. We used to have 3 students that were from out of district, and currently we only have 1.
Before we move to the next slide, I want to go back to bullet 1 and point out about the pension. I want to say for the benefit of those that are listening to the meeting out in the public. So last year, because of the way that we were able to reduce our expenses because of the school shutdown with COVID, we took the funds that were unexpended and we prepaid our pension payment to the town for this year, allowing us to make a 0 line item for pension in this year's budget. So that is an increase, but it's an increase to return back to the typical pension payment that we keep in our budget. It's just that this year's budget only has just a 0 in there because we prepaid with funds from last year. So I just wanted to emphasize that for the public who may not understand what that bullet meant.
Okay, object code 510, which is transportation, is actually a decrease in special ed costs because of collaboration with other districts. reduction in outplay students. We did bring back some students last year, and utilization of less costly facilities in regards to transportation costs. Our special ed costs, tuition 560, 563, another decrease of 136, 470, decrease reduction in outplay students. And our 730 account is an increase of 56,257, and that's for new Chromebooks, 200 new Chromebooks approximately. Our other equipment line, 739, increase of 26,548. Increase again with our debt service, it's in that 739 debt service line item. We did prepay that again. So again, this is just restoring it to what it should be. And this is offset by a reduction of 26,194 in the replacement of non-instructional technology. Line items over the years, we've been trying to upgrade our infrastructure and technology. And at this point, we're at a point we don't feel we need to put anything else in that for this budget year.
And Todd, I want to highlight about the instructional equipment 730. So in our original technology plan for Chromebooks, the plan was that we would be buying Chromebooks every 3 years to replenish the supply, beginning in grade 4 and moving up every 3 years until graduation from high school. With COVID and the necessity for every child at every grade level to have a new Chromebook, or at least one that's under warranty, we could no longer sustain what we've been doing, which is taking the 12th grade Chromebooks, taking the 7th grade Chromebooks of the 6th graders when they're vacating 6th grade and pushing them down to K1, 2, 3. Those are all off of warranty. So those cost us more to repair than it would be for us to just put them on warranty and get a new set. So these Chromebooks will take care of that and bring us up to our new plan. And our new plan will be based on a 4-year warranty because that is now the going duration for warranty. So we'll be a little different in the year, the grade level that we made the switch, but we needed to make sure that we went backwards all the way to K to keep everything on warranty. So going forward, we will always have enough Chromebooks for our staff and students, and they will all be warranted if we stick to the plan of replenishment every year.
Okay, so that's all I have on the overview. Unless you have any questions.
I have a question. Francine, are the Chromebooks going to stay with students year after year so they have the same one?
So the Chromebooks will follow the student until they're off warranty, and then that'll be the year that they get the new one, and then it follows with them again for another 4.
The, George Steele, the slide presentation you just gave, can you copy that for the board?
I can't hear.
It will also be online by video if they want to listen to Todd's presentation as well. But we can send it to you as well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's not any questions, part of the central office, I'm going to go over the technology department budget. We should have a handout on that. So our object code 112, non-certified salaries, that's actually gone down. We're not yet budgeted a salary increase in that line item. Object code 300, other professional tech services, increase of $4,603. Or 45.48%. That's due to additional power school costs for eCollect. This is an online registration permission slips. Our object code 400. Property services, no increase, cost of repairs of non-instructional equipment will remain at $2,000. Object code 590, other professional service travel, no increase, remain the same at 1,000. Object code 690, other supplies and materials, no increase, remain the same at $500. Check equipment, 730, increase of 59,000. We just talked about the Chromebooks. Our software licensing, 735, has increased 5,339. And that is mainly due to the Google Enterprise, which is needed because of distance learning. It gives the software that gives teachers more control over the Google Classroom instruction. Object code 739, replacement of equipment non-instructional, is decreased to 26,194, and as our recent upgrades in our network hardware have resulted in less need for upgrades this year. And our professional development is an increase of 0. It's remaining constant at $5,000. The technology budget, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. Okay, I think we're going to go to people services.
This is a summary of the total budget, the smaller sheets of paper. The next in your pile is the overall budget, organized by line item. And then you have your central office budget. And George, here's the PowerPoint. And then comes pupil services. So with pupil services, you have this, which says pupil services at the top, but you also have the budget narrative. Everything following pupil services will be made in the same way. A spreadsheet and a narrative in your pile.
Good evening, everybody. The budget that I'm presenting to you tonight is continuing to provide excellent education.
I can't hear anything. Is anybody there? Can anyone hear me?
Can you hear us,
Stacy, it's
Stacy?
I can hear you, but I can't hear anybody else.
Yeah, it went blank there for quite a while. I was trying to, you might also get a text from Michelina.
Okay,
It
thanks.
was, I would say, about 4 or 5 minutes.
Anyone vote for me to start from the top? I'm just kidding.
The document that you're sharing with us, we will make available to those who are listening. It will be part of the minutes.
Okay,
So anything that you've read aloud, people can read on their own after this meeting.
so Superintendent Cost just commented that these will be provided in the minutes and you can read them after. I'm reading directly from a document that is the examination of the pupil services budget. We have some other smaller line items that I'll skip over, such as instructional supplies and textbooks, slight increases there. There were no increases in many line items such as library books, instructional equipment, other equipment, and minor increases in other objects. We're talking about under $300. And then our medical services budget is increasing by $1,944, in part to provide for nurse substitute salaries. I met earlier today just to with the executive committee just to discuss the unforeseen potentials of the way that pupil services budgets can be somewhat volatile, but I feel confident that this budget will maintain a high level of education while being fiscally responsible. Does anyone have any questions? Roxy?
This is Roxy Feiner, and I know in your summary that you say the summer school costs are going to increase, but if you look at your chart in the line items, it's actually a big decrease. So I don't know if you could explain the difference in those two statements. Thank you.
Sure, if you could just give me a moment.
So at the top of this screen, item
1450, 1453.
I have to put my glasses on and they fog up with my mask, so I'm sorry. What object code are we referring to?
the last three pages, 560. 453.
Yeah, Todd, actually, I think this is in part because the summer school had been placed in the wrong line item and then we had to correct it with putting it with the outplaced students. So it's possible. Is that what you were going to say, Todd?
Yes, the 560 is just for the summer school tuition and salaries that are paid out of for summer school hit the salary line items. So we have to keep track of it. We're the salaries are 111, 112, and the 560 is for tuition. So that's those summer months, that should be the tuition line item. That explains it.
It does, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
I'll just leave it there.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Jessica Badowski, the new curriculum director. And I am presenting you this budget, which requests instructional, curricular, and assessment materials that are essential to accomplishing our district mission of educating, challenging, and inspiring all students and staff through active and personalized learning pathways. So I present to you a budget of negative 6.83%, and that is a dollar amount of negative 46,472. And that is in large part to what was presented earlier, in that we are forseeking our math instructional coach to assume the position of the center school math interventionist that was vacated by retirement. And the current literacy coach will assume the position of K-6 instructional coach. And just like was reiterated before, I highly believe in the position of instructional coaches for their direct influences on teachers and indirect influence on student achievement. However, I understand that because of costs, we need to look at teachers that are in front of students. And so I would never forsake a teacher that would be in front of a student for one that is not. So I'm hoping that in years to come, we could come to some sort of collaboration where there perhaps could be a part-time math instructional coach at the K-6 level. Any questions on that? Or do I ask for questions at the end? Okay. Okay, so I'll just move on to some of the other line items. Line item 300 for contracted services, that did go down. What I tried to do is look at all the contracted services and professional development, which is in line 590, and then also, it's actually throughout my whole budget, but a lot of the professional development is now being done via Zoom. So that is a huge savings cost for the district. And I'm noticing that as I'm getting emails for next year, they're actually looking to do them in a hybrid model where they're asking teachers to come in for a day, but then they actually do like asynchronous learning for another day. So that is still going to be cheaper than if we went in person for 2 days. So that's positive for next year as well. Line item for instructional supplies, we have our typical things that we purchase for intervention, both at Center School and at Black Rock. I did want to point out that in the line item that has the computer software licenses, I have been actively involved in looking at all the software licenses pre-K-12, along with Jeff Dobos, our IT senior technician. And there is an inventory now that is available to anyone who'd like to see it of all the softwares that are used pre-K-12. And that primarily was for two purposes. One, to eliminate costs of programs that were not being used, and two, to look at the rigor of the programs that were being used to make sure that it matched our district mission. So that is available upon request. In addition, I am purchasing the math and ELA screener for 7th and 8th grade at Thomaston High School. I think it's important to assess where students' grade level fall in these two content areas as they leave center school. And so I'm piloting that out of my budget for this year. And then line 890, which was also professional improvement, has been decreased due to less travel for myself, instructional coaches, and teachers as well. So that one will look at more virtual PD than in person. That's it. Any questions?
Good evening.
Let me start by saying this year's high school budget is one of the more lean budgets I've proposed. We have an increase of 0.5%, and that's after a 3.5% in our certified staff salaries. So of the 14 budget objects, only 2 areas did we increase. We increased in object 111, which is our certified staff salary, again by that 3.5%, which is contractual. The other object, object 739, we increased by 9.5%, and that's a non-instructional piece of equipment that needs to be replaced. The way our school is built, where part of our school sits in the basement where we are right now. If you looked across the hall from here, that is this floor goes into the earth. So what it creates is an awful lot of moisture down here, and this commercial dehumidifier operates typically year-round. This one particularly is about 15 years old, and it has stopped working. So it's not something that we can put off. It's a must replace because it controls mold. And as you know, if mold starts down here, it'll end up everywhere in the building when you have an HVAC system that circulates air. That 9.5% shouldn't, it's not a huge amount of money either. So that increase is a few $1,000s. So therefore, the only large increase is the object 111, which is the salaries. Everything else is a decrease or stayed the same, but I'll point your attention to object 690, which shows an increase, but that's because another line was reallocated. So we moved money around essentially. If you, and that's the fuel line. So we're using a little less fuel in one area, and we just moved it to a different type of fuel in another line. But overall, if you added those two together, there's actually a decrease in the fuel line. In object 611, it shows a negligible increase of 0.36%, and that's basically remains the same year over year. And that's instructional supplies. The reason I want to point to the reason we were able to cut in 12 of the 14 object lines is because teachers are all certified staff and all staff in general. They really go out of their way to save money, keep the level of services the same or better, and save money. And there's several areas where we can accomplish that. In object 300, we decreased by 24%. That's our subline. And that was just a recalculation of how we're going to draw from subs. So rather than use Kelly Services predominantly, we're going to add 2 building subs. And what that results in is a savings, an overall savings. I also want to point you to textbooks and library books. There's significant decreases, and that's simply moving from hard copies to electronic copies, particularly with periodicals. Periodicals, the kids don't even use the hard copy anymore. There's simply no interest in it. But we maintain the same level of service with a decrease in spending that's fairly significant. Same thing for textbooks. All the other lines are, small decreases. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Actually, there's one more I want to point to. There's a huge decrease in 890, and that's our programs and activities. We, this is another example how we try to save money. We hired a nouveau tech teacher, and we had a couple of very good candidates. One of them came with experience and a certification in automotive, which allowed us to use the shop teacher, the VOTEC teacher, for our small engine repair program that we were subcontracting out to Naugatuck Valley, saving us about $29,000 just in the cut of Naugatuck Valley. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is Kristen Bernier speaking on behalf of Thomaston Center School. I appreciate the opportunity to present my budget to the board and to the Board of Finance as well. As we do every year, we look at the transition from Black Rock School to the high school and the needs of the 456 student. This budget reflects that. Some of the lines have slight increases and slight decreases. Overall, we have a 2.23% increase overall. Our salary lines have gone up as other groups have spoken of about contractual salaries. Our natural gas has increased as well as some of our sewer fees. So there's some increases in there. The things that we can control at Center School on the building level, we certainly try to do that. And we try to be as fiscally responsible as we can while still providing a solid instructional program. Our object line 611 has an increase due to software licenses as we have migrated over to our online learning platforms. We've noticed that there's a need for more robust and certain software, so that there's an increase there. Again, in 641, there's an increase as curricular needs change. We needed some more workbooks because of sharing. In the time of COVID, we can't share materials like we typically could, so there's an increase there. We are also requesting to purchase 3 touch boards, so that way the classrooms can be consistent with one another. As right now our teachers are traveling, our students are remaining in the classroom and the teachers are traveling. So we'd like to purchase those touch boards so that way they are consistent. And 890 has an increase to request some work with Marzano Academy for some professional development. Across the district, each of us in our respective building budgets have put in a request for this, and so this is the Center School's portion. Are there any questions? Yes.
Thank you. This is Roxy Feiner. If you could just explain what the Marzano professional development is for people, please.
Sure. Robert Marzano is he's a guru in instructional in instruction and assessment, and he has founded an academy program whereby schools work with Robert Marzano and other top researchers and to do some work on mastery-based learning and standards-based learning. We've been working at this for quite some time in the district, and this working with Robert Marzano and his academy would help us continue that work in a more rapid and more rigorous pace.
Thank you.
Sure.
Good evening, I'm John Kozlak, principal of Black Rock School. I'm glad to have the opportunity tonight to discuss the Black Rock School budget with the Board of Ed, Board of Finance, Mrs. Cost, and the administrators. I want to highlight one line that's already been addressed earlier by Mr. Benson, Mrs. Cost, in great detail. Overall, the Black Rock School budget is an increase of, we project an increase of about $95,000 next year, which is roughly 5%, about 5.1% over this year. I'd like to address a handful of lines, object lines tonight, but in particular, I'd like to address object line 111, which is our certified personnel salaries and costs. The increase projected in that line is about $97,000, which essentially accounts for the entire Black Rock School increase. It's almost a one-to-one correlation. So I'd like to provide a little bit of historical background as far as that line goes. In 2014, at Black Rock School, we spent $1.4 million in salaries on regular education teachers and related arts teachers. That's music, phys ed, library, and so forth, sometimes called specials teachers. 1.4 million in 2014-15. In 2021-22, we project that to be $1.01 million. So over the last 7 years, we project to realize a $400,000 decrease with our teacher costs. And that we're getting to the point, I'm going to explain why, where we're starting to turn that curve the other way, and those costs are going up. We've had a fair amount of attrition through retirement and other means of attrition that naturally occur in schools. When we realized that we were having this attrition, again, due to many retirements, we put in place a recruitment and retention plan that was aimed at getting really special teachers in our school. And this is also taken off in our district as well. We have a recruiting program that matches people both not only with their instructional skills as teachers, but also their dispositions, their philosophies, attributes, and so forth that match what we have going on in our district and where we want to be as a school and in Thomaston. So there's two parts to that, recruitment and retention, right? Through the recruitment process, particularly at an elementary school, we realize a significant bargain, right? Most of the teachers that retire are at top step. We're fortunate at the elementary level to have many candidates who are new to teaching, and we have a great supply of people interested in jobs. So we get a bargain with the recruitment. We're at the point now where after 4 or 5 years of bringing on many new people, where we have an amazing teaching staff. We have a great blend of veterans and newer teachers. They work together beautifully. They learn from each other. They teach each other. And I really feel like instructionally, our school's in the best place it's ever been. But with the retention of these good people and the development of leaders in our school, we don't have that same bargain year over year. So at this point, we're starting to see the contractual increase in salaries due to the retention of some of the people that we've brought on. So although we have seen significant decreases in this line over the past 6 or 7 years, I do project not only this year going into 21-22, but in the future that will continue. But I'm proud to have that. I'm proud to have this retention in place in these good people. So as far as Black Rock School, that's a more detailed description of why that increase occurs. A few other lines I'd like to address. Object 400, which is property services, we see a decrease of about $19,000. We have a projected decrease in natural gas costs. Also, since we had our playground refresh done recently, we expect some one-time decreases in the cost of exterior upkeep. We expect a decrease in object 510, people transportation, about $20,000. In terms of our instructional supplies, object 611, we've realized, our teachers have realized through the course of the past year, some really interesting and different instructional programs, software licenses, instructional supplies for their classrooms that they've come into or they found during the pandemic that we think will be really helpful moving forward. So I don't expect that increase to maintain over the years to come, but we do expect an increase in Object 611 for next year. And finally, as Mrs. Bernier discussed, in Object Line 890, we expect an increase of just under $10,000, which is primarily due to the inclusion of the Marzano program, which is budgeted in all three schools. Be happy to take any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Francine, is there anything else that you would like to present or comment on at this time?
As far as the operating budget, the presentation is complete, and Todd is available as well as the principals that put in for capital requests. That would be our next topic.
There you go.
Thank you. Okay, so the capital budget, we have a total of $336,463 proposed for fiscal year 21-22. I'll quickly go over some of the items. The administrators can help if you have any questions, but for Black Rock School, we have $22,000 in fiscal year 21-22 for repair driveway curbing and replace drainage basins. At Black Rock School, the fire panel is need of replacement of $17,500. That is very old and on its last leg, so that's a very important item that we need to replace. Our rooftop units at Black Rock, $114,590. Again, they have seen their useful life. Yeah, why don't we do that way?
So the first piece was the curbing.
Yeah.
So just a brief elaboration for the boards. The curbing project out in front, we've had that in for a few years and we've expanded it this year. We've had some tree work done out front, which allows us to look at this project in a little bit more expansive way. We have damage with our drainage basins out front along the curb. It's a bit of a safety issue, but also we've expanded that the scope of the project to eliminate the bump outs in our front driveway. We had a tree, it's like a little bump out. They get hit by plow trucks all the time. It creates damage to the curbing and so forth. So this project would also include anywhere from 5 to 7 badly needed additional parking spots in our front parking lot. In addition to cleaning up the curbing, cleaning up the edges and so forth out there. So that's one. The second one is the fire panel. So we have a fire panel that is functional. This year we had to spend roughly $1,700 to $2,000 to replace what's called the dialer on it. And I'm not an expert in this area, but the entire fire panel, I believe, is about a $17,000 project. It is a proprietary product with the vendor that we use. We do not, if anything breaks, we do not have the ability to make repairs on the general unit itself. It's a late model product. And if it goes down, we don't have any sort of fire system in place, which we really need to have. So that's number 2. And number 3 are the rooftop ventilation units. We have 6 rooftop ventilation units at Black Rock. We replaced 1 over the last couple of years, so we have 5 left. They're beyond life expectancy, so it's the analogy like with an old car, right? It still works, but when it stops working, we're going to be in trouble. We continue to incur minor to mid-range repairs on these units. We have one that's particularly troublesome at this point, which is the main office area. But that's a big project. Frankly, it's something that needs to be done. If it's not done, we're going to keep spending money to make repairs. So it's just a matter of managing risk on that one. And at some point it needs to be done, because when we get beyond life expectancy, as with anything else, we continue to run repair costs until we fix it. Any questions for BlackRock Capital? Go ahead, Roxy.
This is Roxy Finer. With this replacing the fire panel, if we do not do that, does this mean we are not going to be able to contact the fire department in case of an emergency?
We are able, it is functional. However, it is old, it is past its, again, life expectancy. And if we do have issues with it, the company does not provide products for that anymore, and we're not able to repair it. So again, it's a gamble, but we really do need to have that. We really do need to have a fire panel. And if this one goes, then we would need to get one immediately potentially in order to operate, because we do have to have a fire safety system in place if we are going to function.
So Roxy, this is Francine. So when we needed this repair last year, if we weren't able to get the part, or if the part was going to take an extremely long time to get to us, multiple days, for example, we'd have two options: shut school or do a fire watch, which would mean we'd have to have enough firefighters sitting in our building to be able to communicate with each other at short distances and watch for fire, which is impractical and antiquated, and most likely impossible to create. So we were very lucky this last repair. We didn't want to make the repair. We were trying to wait until we could replace the whole panel, but we would have ended up shutting school or having a fire watch. So that is what we would have going forward. Every time we need to repair this panel, since it's no longer supported and it's as old as the building, if I'm not mistaken, it needs to be replaced. It makes it difficult for us to find the parts.
We were able to replace the dialer this year because it's sort of an ancillary type part. But the remainder of it, I believe, supported by it's a Siemens product. When I understand, my understanding is it's not able to be fixed if it breaks.
And John, this is Francine again. John, your rooftop units, are those also potentially being looked into by the town for the grant that they were proposing?
Yes, Craig Lefebvre, our head custodian, has been in communications with the folks of the town. I know they're looking at various funding sources, grants, and so forth. So that is a conversation that's in progress as well.
So I wanted to be certain that everyone understood that Matt was looking into putting that into a grant or some type of program whereby the savings that we would yield would offset the cost of paying back the purchase and installation.
Thank you.
Okay, so for the high school, we have the welding lab in two parts. The first part is $32,475, and the second part is $28,992. So that's fiscal year 21-22 and fiscal year 22-23. At the high school, we have some asphalt paving in 21-22 for $67,900. At the high school, the auditorium epoxy floor coating in fiscal year 23-24 is $39,750. And then at the high school, the auditorium lighting, again in two phases, $52,498 in fiscal year 21-22 and $45,039 in fiscal year 22-23. Tractor for the Nature Center, $29,500 in fiscal year 21-22. And finally, again at the high school, the main floor lockers in fiscal year 23-24, $24,315. Any questions?
They reopened to the George Signal. Have they reopened the Nature Center?
Yes.
Have they reopened the Nature Center? I know John's been using his tractor out there. And,
So, it's nothing sweet. Keeping the trails open.
We put, about $20,000 into the renovation of the nature center, and that was not out of our operating budget. That was out of grants from around town, basically. The nature center, one of the key pieces to keeping it in the condition that it now is in is maintaining those trails. And those trails have to be manicured regularly, or weeds will very quickly come up and overtake the nature center like it did in the past 2 decades. Excuse me? We did. The trail, the nature center doesn't look anything like it did. It is an outdoor classroom at this point. And once it is completed, I will invite people in town to come in and take a peek at it. But it's nothing like it was. It was a fraction of what you would see now. There's about, I don't know, it went from about 40 to 50 meters of trail to about 400 or 500 meters of trail that sort of lined all around through there. We're poised to even do something at a grander scale, and we would love to put a ropes course in there, which would bolster our PE program. It would be fantastic. You could do activities ranging from team building to just, strength and agility. Yeah, and then there's a curricular piece also to the nature center. So I'll let Jess jump into that.
So just today, I put up on the main page of the Thomaston schools.org a document that has all of the projects that are currently being worked on at the Nature Center pre-K-12. I've invited the district to take this on as a district initiative where all people, custodians, secretaries, teachers, everyone who wants to be involved in a project can actually do that. So that page, I think it's that red tab, Francine. So that document shows not only who's involved in the project, but the current updates as to where it is. For example, the compost area was cleared out by Mr. Craig this past week. Okay, and so that's up there. But those are all, anyone who wants to be involved, including board members, we'd love for you to jump in on the project or create your own. And then obviously this is going to be for student learning once we start getting the students out there.
You really can't explain it, so you would have to take a tour out there to actually see what's happening. But Francine, if you could put that last picture up.
Yeah, that's the compost.
The compost area. So I don't do anything that doesn't have a potential, or I don't look for potential for saving or even bringing in revenue. That area right there in that bottom right is going to be our compost area. All right, and that's not a small compost center. So if you think about the pounds and pounds and pounds of food and other products that are tossed away and cost us tipping fees, all right, we are going to reduce our tipping fees, and at the same time, we're going to be able to sell that soil and hopefully bring in some kind of revenue stream from that compost area. So while there was zero of town money spent out of the operating budget, this composting area is going to be a serious piece of that nature center. Just alone for this, the tractor is primarily for this. So it's for two things, manicuring those trails and making sure we tamp down the growth. But this compost is going to have to be turned on a daily basis. And key to being successful in this is having that tractor able to do it. So it's going to be it's going to be a tertiary system. It's going to be 3 different stalls, each at a different phase of the decomposition process. By the time it gets to the 3rd one, we're going to be able to sell bags of soil. And that's ongoing. That's, it doesn't make a ton of money, but it'll bring some revenue.
And John, this was a project that a student has been working on, trying to get to come to fruition, and with your support and the nature center plan, it's.
There are about a dozen student projects involved in this currently. So, we don't, of course, that's what the nature center is for, so that we could use it for curricular needs. But that doesn't mean curriculum means it's in the classroom. This could be individual projects that students are using that area for.
Are the students involved in maintaining the compost?
Yeah, well, that's our plan. That's our plan.
Who will be running the equipment?
Students?
Students will.
Yeah. They won't be manicuring the trails, but they'll certainly be using it to turn compost, move it from stall to stall. Those are logistics that we haven't even started to tackle yet. I mean, for school use, it'll be open every day, obviously, and because we're going to use a lot of that soil for maintaining for public, we haven't even tackled that yet. I would think maybe a Saturday or an evening, once a week, probably. A lot of what? Any questions?
George, tomorrow, I'm scheduled with Mr. Credit to ride the track. I wanted him to do it today at 3 o'clock, but I didn't want to come to this meeting.
He drove by my window today, and I was like, where is he going to? Are we taking down part of the building? Yes, we're taking a lot of the invasive species out. That work is ongoing. That's a student project.
And I'd like to just comment about center schools capital projects or lack thereof this year. It's not because we don't have capital projects and we don't have things in the works. It's just that in planning with the other schools, we looked at center schools' needs and they're not as great right now. Last year, we were very grateful to get the grant for the security. So we have brand new cameras at center school. The town public works fixed part of our back parking lot projects. So that was done last summer. So we are excited about those new projects and those new things at center school. Other repairs that may have been part of capital have been taken care of through our operating or through other sources, such as our front walkway and whatnot. I certainly would put in for a TCS accessible ramp because I feel that we need accessibility at center school, especially since we do have students who could use the ramp currently as they have some ambulatory needs. But certainly looking at the price and looking at where we are and in light of COVID and in light of all the things that financially that the town of Thomaston has to look at now, center school decided to, not put that part into the capital project. Certainly the girls' locker room would certainly still be on the table for capital improvement projects. The girls' basketball team has done a phenomenal job under the direction of Mr. Bob Staff to make that a space for girls to be excited to be a part of. But that would have been, part of the capital ask for center school. So I thank you for, the generosity that you've shown in years past, and this year we decided to support the projects of Black Rock and the high school at this time, especially the nature center and the things that needs to be done with our little guys over at Black Rock. The other thing I wanted to mention was in our packet for center school, I'm not sure what happened, but Black Rock's projects were included in center school, so we will get you the center school program descriptions. It was inadvertently attached to Black Rock's, and centers is not there, so we will definitely get that to you. Thank you.
I want to make a comment about what Kristen just said to you. Kristen did not mention something that she wishes we could improve, but it doesn't belong to the school. We'd like to ask if the town could improve the tennis court area or minimally allow for it in a safe condition to be unlocked and accessible to our students at Central School. Right now, we're using our outdoors in so many different ways than we've ever used them before with COVID. Having that chained and locked tennis court area that's abandoned and cracked for tennis purposes would be a wonderful place for students to play a kickball game. So if there would be a way that the members of this Board of Education or the members of the Board of Finance who are here could speak on behalf of the students of Center School and allow for some access and minimal improvements to the floor for safety, the ground in that area for safety, it would expand opportunities in a way for Center School that would relieve a lot of access to outdoor recess, instructional areas, mask break areas. So I ask that anyone here who hears this message and anyone out there in the public who's listening, please consider putting forth any kind of effort that they can to support unchaining that tennis court so that our students at Center School can have a better place to play and learn outdoors.
Does that fall under the Board of Selectmen or the Recreation Department? The Parks and Rec Department, our students a couple of years ago, a couple springs ago, had written to the Parks and Rec Department and had written to the First Selectman's office. And I don't know the answer to them. It was under the impression that because of the new Nystrom's, that was going to remain locked. It was unsafe, and it was too expensive. I wasn't asking for funds. The PTA has approached me about, putting some funding in there to help support whatever that needs. But since Sanford Field doesn't belong to Center School, it belongs to the town of Thomaston. I don't know if it's under the Parks and Rec, or I don't know if it's under whose jurisdiction it's under. But it's not Center School, because it would be open if it were.
And our students, like Kristen said, have made the attempt themselves, with the support of the staff at Center School, to reach out to who they thought were the appropriate officials to make this request. And I have reached out, and Kristen has reached out, but we're left with one entity telling us that the other entity is in charge, and neither entity is saying who is in charge. So we would like to be in charge, and we would like to allow those gates to be open. And if it's because we need to keep them closed every afternoon to stop people from accessing it outside of the school day, it would be our pleasure to make that part of our daily routine in maintaining access or shutting off access to those tennis courts as the town deems fit.
The condition of that course, the courts, had to do with the tree on the border with the Senate. That has to come down. I don't know who's going to contact them, see if they let us take it down and excavate out those roots, because the roots are, it's been even on that court. So somebody needs to contact them. Maybe I'll talk to Glenn and see if he can talk to Snett and take down that tree.
That would be wonderful, and then I would be able to branch out, no pun intended, to the other community groups like Rotary and Education Enrichment Fund and Community Foundation and Thomaston Savings Bank. But I can't do that until we know that we have permission to
push funds in that direction and make whatever improvements the town will support in plan, not necessarily in funding.
Well, you know, the Rotary Club did the basketball court.
Yes.
And they got a lot of volunteer help.
And our PTO is ready. We just need someone to open the lock and get the person who's in charge of the lock to know that we're ready to use that space. So I'm putting it out there to the whole board as well as the members of the Board of Finance that are here. That our hands are tied now for year 2. And we really need that outdoor space. The equity between going from Black Rock to Center School, there's no comparison.
It is a shame that a potential asset is sitting more.
Yeah.
I think one way or another.
Just let us know what we can do. So we have completed the full presentation of the operating budget and the capital budget going forward. So our capital budget is a 5-year budget and our operating budget is a 1-year budget. So at this time in the meeting is when I ask that the Board of Education consider possible action on the operating budget as presented and action on the 21-26 capital budget that was presented this evening.
This is Roxy Finer. I make a motion to approve the 2021-2022 operating budget as presented.
Matt Van second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries.
This is Roxy Finer. I make a motion to approve the 2021-2026 capital budget as presented.
Matt Van second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries.
This is Roxy Finer. I make a motion to adjourn.
Matt Van second.
All in favor? Oh, discussion.
I'd like to make one statement about before we adjourn. For the public that's listening, the approval of the budget tonight is not the final step. The budget progresses throughout the spring until it reaches its final place in June. So please keep in touch with what's going on in the town regarding the budget before we adjourn. I wanted to make that statement.
Thank you, Mrs. Cos.
Make a statement.
Yes.
For the people that are listening, the Board of Finance will have several meetings on the budget, one of which will have to do with the education budget. And every year, only 3 or 4 people show up to listen to that education budget. And that's where you should be if you want some input to the Board of Finance. And then please attend our hearings on the budget when they're noticed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.